we go. All right, I'm just going to share my screen. We're going to give people just a few minutes to come in. Okay. Where's that there? All right. Can everyone see the slides where it says, can you see my first slide?
Yes, I can.
Perfect, great.
Yeah.
Let me just pull things back up. Just gonna get ready to start in a minute. Just to say apologies for everybody for the last minute change over to Zoom from GoToWebinar. I hope it hasn't caused too much disruption for your attendance today. So we appreciate you bearing with us while we had some technical difficulties with our systems on our side. Appreciate you sticking with us on this. Okay. Right. I'm going to get started, and thank you everybody again for joining. Just a quick bit of housekeeping before we actually get properly started with today's session. Just do take a moment to check your audio and visual settings and confirm that you can see everything. If you do have any issues during the session today, my colleague Marcella Raelli will be monitoring our chat box. So do use the chat box to speak to Marcella, who will respond directly to help. And we will have a Q&A session at the end, but if you do have any questions that you want to pop in the chat as we go along, please do feel free to do that. And Marcella will monitor that and answer any or save them up for the end of the session. So just to get started and introduce ourselves, I will start with a couple quick introductions. So my name is Megan Mazzella, and I am the Business Development Manager for Sage Campus in EMEA. And joining me today, we are delighted to have Dr. Robert Thomas, who's a lecturer in marketing at Aston University and the author of 2 of our new courses coming in January 2022, Conduct a Literature Review and Analyze Qualitative Data, which he's going to be talking about more during this presentation, and will be far more interesting, I'm sure, than what I'm going to discuss on the general kind of introduction to Sage Campus. Just a quick couple things so that we can get to know who's on the call today in a little bit. I'm just going to run a couple quick polls to get started. So a couple polls. We're just really interested to hear what your role is at your institution. Are you faculty? Are you a librarian, a researcher, or other? That's not covered under that. And if you could let us know in the chat what your job role or role is. And then we'd be also really interested to know what level you predominantly teach in at undergraduate level, postgraduate level, again, other, and if you could let us know in the chat if what that other is, that would be great. So I'm just going to share these results. Thank you, everybody. So looks like we've got mostly faculty joining us today and mostly undergraduate. So just to So welcome to everybody. We're going to be talking about things that will help all groups, but it's just useful to get a sense of where you're all from today. Great. Okay. Oh, sorry, I forgot to flip my slides. So today we're going to cover what is Sage Campus. We're going to go over what the new courses are that are coming in January. Then Robert will be going over a spotlight of the new courses from January, and then I'll talk a little bit about how Sage Campus works for universities. And we'll, of course, as I said, have time for questions. So to start, Sage Campus supports the teaching and learning of skills and research methods through over 250 hours of structured online learning. Our online courses are self-paced and instructor-led, comprising of an engaging mix of trusted Sage quality content, video, interactive, formative assessments, as a few examples. Our flexible learning pathways cover those trickier topics and skills that learners need to engage with across the lifespan of their academic study and practice, and all the way into employment, and helping undergraduates learn to navigate information, thinking critically, through to early career researchers with writing their report, wanting to report on their data and getting published in a journal. Our user-friendly platform makes it simple for faculty to assign courses to their students, or for researchers and students to learn autonomously, building practical skills for study, research, and the workplace. So the content pathway that we've developed at Sage Campus, here you can see that at a very high level, we cover the lifespan of academic study and practice. One of the key purposes of Sage Campus is to help institutions in improving student outcomes, researcher outcomes, and employability. So we choose topics and skills that students struggle with, faculty find difficult to teach, or perhaps don't have the time, but the students still need to have a good level of competency in, and that universities have told us were important to them. So we have navigating information with things like critical thinking and information literacy, data literacy, which are courses to help you get started with data, research skills, so research planning, reporting on findings, gathering data online, social media research questions, data science, which is collecting and managing data, analyzing that through with data science like R and Python, and getting published. So hopefully you'll be able to identify some programs at your institution where these topics and skills are being taught, and where these courses might map nicely to those curricular needs. This is just that content pathway in a little bit more detail, showing the current 27 courses under those different headings, along with the 4 new courses in January and where they sit. So you'll see conducting literature review under the research planning, and analyzing data, analyzing quantitative data under the analyzing data. And it moves through, broadly speaking, from undergraduate to early career researcher. So pedagogy is at the heart of how we approach the creation of courses at Sage Campus. The pedagogy behind Sage Campus supports a wide range of teaching and learning approaches, such as asynchronous learning, blended learning, and the flipped classrooms. As I've mentioned, the courses are fully self-paced to fit around busy schedules, but are structured to provide a scaffolded learning experience. We have an expert instructor at the heart of each course who's helped design the course. They're experts in their field and use a lot of real-life practical examples that are directly relevant and applicable to research, especially to those in social sciences, although they do broadly adapt to cover lots of different discipline areas. It would actually be great if everyone wants to pop into the chat now what your particular area discipline of research is within your institution, so that we get a sense of where your academic interests lie. Our courses use an engaging mix of screencasts, video, text, interactives, and practical activities to keep learners engaged as they move through the disciplines. And there's knowledge checks, formative assessments throughout with an emphasis on practice to reinforce that learning and mastery of the topics to embed those skills. Learners do receive a certificate at the end of those courses to demonstrate completion, and this helps to motivate learners to completing those courses. And of course, it's all trusted SAGE quality courses. The courses are all rigorously tested and reviewed for excellence. So I wanted to give you a quick peek, as I won't be doing a demo today, on the platform of what it actually looks like in the platform and some of those features. So you can see that we have a learner dashboard, course homepages. Courses are broken down into modules, so there's also a module homepage. Here's an example of just some of the videos that you can see, which are all closed captions. We have, these all come from our How to Get Published courses. So you can see that on How to Get Published, things are non-SAGE specific. We have lots of links that link out and detailed guidance. We have flashcards, so do's and don'ts, and a streamlined page content. Got lots of different things where we see how to do things, and the interesting little kind of advice on how to actually approach the different topic. And we have lots of opportunities for reflective activities where we ask learners to pause and consider how these topics and the information can be applied within their own research and your own studies. As I mentioned again before, the structured learning and self-assessment. So we have a number of activities, so things like think it through, to reflect and put into practice the information that you are learning, as well as a completion certificate. So that's just a quick overview on that. The platform itself has 3 user roles that support learners, faculty and librarians, in getting the most out of SAGE Campus, with faculty being able to assign courses to cohorts and being able to track their progress as they use these courses to either supplement their teaching or weave it into their teaching. And librarians can access a unique reporting dashboard of usage and learner progress across their institution, which we support with training and onboarding support. So what I really would like to talk to you about today, and before I hand over to Rob, is to tell you about the 4 new courses that we're launching in January 2022 as part of our brand new Learn Skills to Write a Winning Dissertation learning pathway. With the launch of these new courses, the SAGE Campus Suite will grow from the 27 current courses to 31 courses. And while all the courses in SAGE Campus can stand alone, we do have a number of recommended learning pathways that guide learners in developing skills in particular topic areas. So just to quickly focus on the new learning skills pathway, which is launching in January. This is the Learn Skills to Write and a Winning Dissertation pathway, and it comprises of 4 courses, roughly amounting to about 17 hours of additional learning to the already 250 plus hours in the current SAGE Campus Suite. So in this new pathway, we have critical reading and writing, do your interviews, conduct a literature review, which we know has been something that we've had a lot of feedback from, as there being a really keen need in universities to have some support in helping students and researchers with this, as well as analyze qualitative data. And as I said, we're privileged to be joined today by the course author of two of these courses, the Conduct a Literature Review and Analyze Qualitative Data. So rather than giving you an overview of these, I'm going to let Rob go through them. So he'll be talking to you today about his two courses here. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Rob.
Thank you very much, Megan. Privilege is a strong word, but thank you. I appreciate that enormously. That's the first time in my career. So thank you for that. So a warm welcome to everybody who's joined. I can see that we've got obviously a mix of academics. So the first thing I really just wanted to talk about was in terms of sort of my experience of these programs, the reason why I have got on board with this and welcomed the opportunity to do these courses is because I see these as two of the perennial and major issues that we encounter not only as staff, but students and librarians. These can be roadblocks for students, and particularly the analysing the qualitative data. But I'm particularly passionate about the literature review because it's multidiscipline. It's an integral part of the learning process, and wonderful. We've got Romania, Pakistan, Brazil, fantastic. So I'm very keen always keen to create a very digestible and highly accessible literature review document or course rather for this. Again, that is not necessarily fixated with undergraduate, not fixated with postgraduate, but all encompassing, predicated on my own experiences of teaching across those levels and predicated definitively on student need. Obviously, I work as an external examiner. I get to see an awful lot of feedback for research methods and my own students' feedback on research methods. I consult at FE and HE as well. So it's these courses have been predicated not on what I would want as an academic, because I think our lens is very difficult, and as a middle-aged cynic, that can be very difficult to sort of propagate that. But it's very much student-centric, and it's from them that I've created the structure for this. So the key then for both courses is that obviously we're flipping the classroom, but it's digestible. And the issue that I normally find is that both the literature review and analysing qualitative data is arguably taught within a finite period of time, and then students are ostensibly left alone to go and do that. And that's been the academic model for years and years and years. Whether you're an undergraduate, postgraduate, doctoral student, you are left to your own devices. And while there's nothing wrong with that independent learning, naturally we do know the independent learning has to be underpinned. So that's an element of that. So obviously the self-directed learning of this is an important paradigm. But what I've wanted to do with both courses is ensure that there is communicative support throughout. And that's one of the highlights of the modular design here, that the student ostensibly is not left on their own, despite this being virtual by definition. There are massive points of contact, lots of Q&A, lots of opportunities to reflect, and there's lots of insight from myself across a myriad of questions that students have asked me over the best part of a 20-year career. But the other thing I wanted as well was I really wanted a strong sort of meta-cognitive element to this, and I don't know about your experiences, and I don't mean to generalize about students, but regardless of level, many don't think about thinking. And one of the primary blocks to writing a literature review, or indeed analysing qualitative data, is that they become fixated on a point rather than the journey. And throughout all 6 modules on both programs, there's that element of thinking about what they're doing and reflecting upon what they're doing embedded in every structure. So they're building confidence, they're building their lexicon, and we are creating a support mechanism in that. And the other thing I wanted to do with these broadly was, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the notion of the C3 before me element in education. I think students, and again, I wouldn't want to generalize, but when there's anxiety and neuroses about something new, there's a fear perhaps to ask other students or other colleagues at their level of study, and they come straight to us, which is important, and that's what we're there for. But one of these elements is that every question they can conceivably ask, I've tried to incorporate into the text. So this C3 before me paradigm, where you're encouraging students to talk to their colleagues and peers within the context of their student group, I've tried to build that dynamic and framework into these programs. So again, that builds confidence, and they build a critical lens of what's expected, and it generates discourse between the students. So hopefully all of those things can be met, but I'm particularly keen on that sort of metacognitive element. But I think more so post-COVID, I do think that these modules present best practice. The world has changed, academia has changed. We have a new generation of students who are more used to working independently and online, and hopefully that these modules with a very, very strong kinesthetic approach can offer a significant companion for them going forward. Well, that's certainly my hope. That's just an overview of it. So I will ask if there are any quick questions, and if all of that sort of makes sense. But the benefits are that students are supported perpetually and consistently through these hours, and have additional hours to reflect on this, particularly with the practical element. So does anybody have any questions initially? I hope that's okay, Megan, to ask.
Sorry, I was just muted. Yes, that's absolutely fine. See if
volume, that may well be me. I shall bring my face closer to the screen. Forgive me. That's
yeah, I'm not sure I can increase mine. I can probably move my
mine's at
microphone.
Maximum. It may well be my microphone.
Okay.
So if that is the only question, is it possible just to move the slide on?
Yeah, of course.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm going to start with conduct a literature review, because the reality is for every student at every level, they're going to come across the necessity of some juncture having to explore the world of literature and create something meaningful and non-descriptive. And I think that's one of the issues. When we talk about a literature review, too often it is posited as a literature description, and that's something that we want to get students away from. But I think one of the issues with my experience, and I'm not sure whether you would concur with this, students come into an academic situation like a university, and perhaps to get into the university, they've had very much a learn by rote process. So actually what a review is and how to construct a review and present a review gets lost in very much a learn by rote process, where they are guided through an examination process and perhaps aren't necessarily given all of the key skills. They're certainly given some, we know that from as a matter of fact, but the reality is some of the key nuanced skills are perhaps not covered as they should be. And again, students come in and they may not really cover a literature review until they get to level 6 or their final year, where they may have a couple of hours dedicated to what a literature review is, rather than what they need to do to produce a quality literature review. So again, part of the paradigm is this key skill is moving from literature description to a distinct and definitive and meaningful literature review. So one of the things we've concentrated on as well is the purpose of the review, and trying to get students to understand that it's not a standalone proposition, although we address that in the modules. And the module is for those who may be writing something systematic or writing something integrated or chronological or methodological, but to understand it as a structural pillar that basically will build or provide the underpinnings of the whole research process. So some time is spent getting students to conceptually think about this as arguably the primary means of propagating their research ideas, other than the research question. The one thing as well that we've looked at, or I've looked at, is that students now, there's a distinct lack of writing frequency. So many governing bodies are advocating lots and lots of differentiated assessment type, which is appropriate, but very, very rarely, even in my institution, Aston, which is an excellent institution, are students putting pen to paper that often. Lots of criticality comes from presentations, but rather than doing something like this and providing something in cursive. So the module addresses this lack of writing frequency and gives the students multiple opportunities to start developing their writing frequency. And there are significant tasks within that, regardless of level, that can ensure that they build that confidence and build that lexicon. And we'll also spend some significant time trying to diminish writing apprehension. When something new is conveyed in a couple of hours, the reality is it is not absorbed, it is not encoded, and that creates neuroses. And that's, for me as an adult, working when I'm something of a Luddite, even working with these online platforms has created an enormous amount of anxiety, or certainly did, and I could probably have done with a module and 6 modules to sort that out. But we are desperate to try and resolve that, so we've got lots of confidence building blocks throughout the whole element of this particular module. So we're not just throwing students into a theoretical debate about what a literature review is. Even from the first modules, we have writing exercises, we are providing key sentences, key terms, keywords, getting students to spend time summarizing, paraphrasing, and so on, so they develop that skill more authentically. So one of the elements we spend time on as well is understanding, finding, and really the exegesis of quality academic sources. So there's a significant amount of time spent on finding a journal, finding journal websites, and the deconstruction of those journals, looking for keywords, key sentences, and we've provided significant elements of the workbook to show students how to log these ideas so they become a referral point. But one of the elements is, by doing that, we're encouraging recall from our students, regardless of level. I think that often gets overlooked when we present a literature review, but recall and the ability then to start putting everything together is of critical importance. So that's a significant part of my rationale for this as well. And I don't know whether you'd concur with me, and naturally this is my opinion, but despite students coming in, going through fantastic educational systems, they have poor reading skills insofar as they do not commit to lots of reading. I know I asked my students to read something, even I was teaching the MBA this morning. They're a wonderful bunch of students. I asked them to read a 3-star journal, and it was as if I was sending them to a faraway island to be incarcerated. The reaction was a poor one. Why? It's Friday. So what we are trying to do with this is very much trying to underpin quality reading, not endless reading. No student wants to do that, and no academic wants to do that, but lots and lots of strategies to immerse themselves within the literature and get the most from it within a traditional time frame of compiling a review, whether it be systematic or very much part of a broader research program. So we come to the crux of the matter then, is that the central focus is on how to do it rather than what it is. Although we do cover what it is in module 1, the ethos, particularly with that metacognitive element of the self-directed learning, is very much a blow-by-blow account of how to produce something definitive that will stand up to academic rigor, which will be persuasive, which is full of argumentation, counter-argument, rebuttal, how to present it, and also within that framework, how to respond to supervisory meetings, and how to get the most from those in terms of developing the above skills. So while there's a lot of traditional elements in there, there's a huge amount of focus on the digestible element of this, and we explore each element in a transparent, authentic way, again, building that lexicon and building confidence through almost a kinesthetic approach. And one of the keys is, and perhaps students wouldn't necessarily be conscious of this, if they engage properly, they will do an awful lot of reading and writing during this module. So hopefully it will just become a strong schema for them and mitigate for some of the anxieties of having to read and do a lot of writing, particularly if they've had no experience of writing large reviews or something research-based for some time. So that's a broad overview. So I will ask, are there any questions at this juncture from any of you? I'll be more than happy to address them quickly before I move on. No?
Can't see any, so.
Okay, that's great. I always take silence. It's a student-based silence. It's that, okay, we know what you're saying. We don't necessarily want to say something online, but naturally, you know, I don't know whether it's appropriate, Megan, but if anybody wanted to speak to me after this, I would be happy to do so. You know, there's no issue.
Yeah, we can keep the line open if you've got time, so that's not a problem.
Yeah, yes, I certainly can make, you know, sort of, if anybody has any sort of pressing questions, by all means. But of course, everybody's in the industry, so hopefully a lot of these things are apparent. But again, what I would go back is, I've got a lot of friends who are librarians, and I know for a fact they are asked perpetually about literature reviews. And the difficulty is they're given a large research book, and of course, just the depth and breadth of that is off-putting immediately. So this nice curtailed approach will work. So forgive me. So these are some of the elements of the modules. We've tried to cover everything, albeit within a limited amount of time. But one thing that might appeal to you as academics, and indeed actually if there are students and researchers out there, is we spend a lot of time understanding the synergy between the research question and the direction it provides within the context of the literature review. And in my experience, students will create a research question without any definitive understanding of where it's situated, what might be needed in context, and how it will guide them through the tranche of literature that is readily available. So we have a number of significant exercises up front in Module 2 that will help students refine, redact processes, and we also support the creation of research questions as well, which I think is critically important before you go into that review. So, but I will go back to Module 1, but I just wanted to stress that in case I forgot actually. But one of the first things we do then is what a review needs to demonstrate, and we talk about persuasion, argumentation, tone, and I think tone is particularly important. And then that sort of proceeds looking at identification and justification, but more importantly, what a review shouldn't be. And a lot of the textbooks I've evaluated over the years don't concentrate on that. They present a philosophical debate about what a literature review is, rather than what it shouldn't be in the context of a distinct level of learning. So I think that's quite an important facet of that. We've discussed Module 2, albeit briefly, but I do think that the RQ or research element there is great. And I've actually asked my students at undergraduate and postgraduate about that, and the response was overwhelming, because ostensibly research methods, too often students are told, develop a research question. They go away and develop one, and invariably it's not quite right for the purpose. So Module 3 is about, again, getting students to engage with the plethora of academic literature, but doing so in a systematic and sequential manner. And I think by doing that, we're mitigating for a lot of anxiety, a lot of neuroses, a lot of questioning. So we've got a really nice systematic approach to that, with lots and lots of top tips, lots of research hacks, and to how to do that within a limited amount of time and to maximize that. And then we start to explore how you find an argument, because the reality is, I think a lot of students feel they have to create an argument and don't necessarily understand that every argument they need has been created and is quite explicitly signposted. So we're getting them into that comfort zone, which I think will mitigate for a lot. So we move on then to the strong parameters of that argument, looking at traditional counter argument and rebuttal. But we've got some really nice mind maps we've developed for students to record these elements, how to look at the synergistic relationships between contemporary and historical arguments, how to phrase and present arguments appropriately, how to structure them not only in an introduction, but also in the literature review, so we have that synergy. There's a huge amount going on there. And in my experience, the students very rarely understand what an argument is beyond hyperbole and arguing amongst themselves. We have lots of examples of good argumentation, structured argumentation, fact argumentation. We tell them what adverbs to avoid when presenting this. We're providing key sentences. So there's a huge amount of information in there which will mitigate and ameliorate a lot of neuroses for students and that writing anxiety, because we're making provision for that and starting paragraphs and so on. There's a huge amount of positivity. And I think rebuttal as well, again, in my experience, undergraduate, postgraduate, doctoral students, DBA students, the neuroses about rebuttal, because they think that counter argument and then rebuttal, I don't see it. And I do a lot of reviewing as well, and I don't see it an awful lot in the reviews I do. So I think that is a sort of multidiscipline, multi-level benefits should you be interested in this. So Module 5, then we actually come to the writing up of this, and we explore structure, we explore sentence structure, paragraph structure, we explore sentence clauses and how to present an argument appropriately. We talk about identifying bias and generalization so it's not copied. And one of the really things I'm key to do is we've created an argument map within the workbook, so the students can create almost a satellite navigation of the arguments they're seeing and have an opportunity to put these together prior to the writing process. And I think that's something that I've used as a student myself, and is huge. And I know I get my students to do it, and it's enormously beneficial. When you see the argument in front of you, it's a lot easier to disseminate, and it's a lot easier to recreate for a persuasive piece of work. The last element then is we look at how you should structure your literature review with all of these elements contained within that, which is great, because again, it takes out the neuroses of writing, and we've talked at length about how to create meaningful paragraphs that contain argument, counter-argument, rebuttal, and so on and so forth. But we've also looked at some key skills like paraphrasing, lots of exercises to help students do that. I have trawled the SAGE archive for some fantastic quotes from some of their papers from multiple disciplines, and there are lots of opportunities for students to really grasp that. I do talk about referencing as well, DOI numbers, all of this kind of stuff. And there's a good section on plagiarism, because I don't know what your experiences is. Plagiarism for students still seems to be out in the ether somewhere. Lots still don't understand it or the consequences of it. So we've got examples and exemplars and opportunities for them to try and discover plagiarism within work, looking at through journals and things of that nature. So again, I'm conscious of time. So that's ostensibly what we've got in the conducting the literature review, but I would stress it is multidisciplinary. All of the examples, despite being me being a marketer, have very little to do with marketing. That will be inappropriate. Nobody wants to spend their time reading marketing examples, particularly me. So we've got things like criminology, geography, physics, sociology, and the list goes on. There are multiple examples from multiple elements. And one of the things I'm really proud about with the team is that we've created characters throughout all of these elements that are based on real students, although those students aren't revealed, and scenarios and questions and issues that they have found themselves having to resolve. So ostensibly, I go back to that C3 before me. They have a chance to ask students almost virtually within the module about traditional issues. So hopefully it will save you some time, and some of my colleagues in the libraries pointing in the right direction. So this hopefully is a one-stop for students at all levels. So I'll again, that's it ostensibly for that. Again, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. But these are some of the sort of the major elements I've looked at. So we've talked about confidence building, but I think the naturalistic and kinesthetic element is really strong. And I think, you know, post-COVID and these unprecedented times, I think that's critically important. We need to be moving towards that. But I'm very confident that we'll have a strong schematic development and a diminishing of the neuroses about what these things are. Developing that technical language, so discussions with you as potential supervisors, librarians, become more technical, and that can develop confidence. But again, the big thing, and obviously you can read these slides for yourself, it's sequential. We start absolutely, unequivocally at the beginning. There are no gaps. So you're probably thinking, well, there must be gaps within a 4 to 5 hour process. There are not. I've tried to cover everything that students have traditionally raised. So that sequential process where it's bit by bit, sentence by sentence, structure by structure, issue by issue, hopefully will have huge benefits for students at all levels. So those are the elements. So the second module is based on analysing qualitative data. Just out of interest, are any of you, how many of you teach sort of qualitative research methods or are qualitative researchers? Is there any way of finding out in the chat? You are, fantastic. Okay, so that makes 2 of us. You'll always find at least 2 qualitative researchers in a room. We should be proud of that. We should be proud.
I've got 3.
Wonderful. I think, you know, I think that is the 3 of us. This is good. This is good times. Yeah, people normally. I know I'm quantitative. Okay, whatever. So good. That's great. So obviously some of these things will be perhaps more pertinent to you, and a lot of these things you'll understand. But what I would suggest is that there's teaching any kind of data analysis can be difficult, primarily because I think, and I wouldn't want to generalize, I've got some elements here. It's normally left until a final year research methods module where the student suddenly in their last year of study has to embrace something brand new, which can be scary too often. And again, please correct me, it's taught in what, 2 hours session. You're teaching 100 years of conceptual development in 2 hours. And then we expect students to go out into the big wide world of research and do it properly. So it's a difficult thing to do, and it's something that I'm very keen to try and resolve. Not that I have a messianic complex when it comes to analysing qualitative data, but I know that it's difficult. I'm still learning. I've been doing it for a while now, But this is what I've sort of gleaned from my students then, that it's too often left. And when they have to do it, they don't have access to the right elements or tone, and often textbooks still are not necessarily user-friendly in terms of kind of an undergraduate or indeed postgraduate audience. So one of the primary concerns is that it is presented as overly complex. And I think we can fall into that trap as academics, that, by providing complexity, somehow we substantiate what we're doing. But look, I very much work on the principles that if you can't say it simply, you don't know it. And then what I find out on a daily basis is that I don't know a lot and I'm learning something constantly. So I sympathize with the students. And I think one of the key things is that it can be presented as elitist, and the philosophical element, while absolutely critical, if you're presenting that up front, anything practical gets lost because students are lost in a world of Kantian ethics or interpretivism or critical realism, and we've swamped them with ideas that have taken thousands of years to try and refine, and we expect them to go off and try and find clarity in that, okay? But I think this is the other one. Few or no opportunity to experience analysis from top to bottom. Get exposed to constructs, they don't get exposed to practicalities to do that. For this work, then, we wanted to be as fundamental as possible and as kinesthetic as possible. And what we have done, there are lots of wonderful things out there that use QDA programs. This is very much centered on a practical experience. Lot of immersion, which is traditional way of doing this, although we look at the benefits of using both transcribers, using both software and so on and so forth. But we've tried desperately to get the students into very much a kinesthetic development with this, so they're building confidence at each step. And that's one of the major designs, very much like the literature review chapter, is that it is step by step. There is an exegesis of every solitary process. There are no conceptual leaps. We take nothing for granted, particularly with knowledge, and it has been reduced down to a basic level. That is not to say that it is not appropriate, but the language, the tone, the semantics, it is for a student coming into this for the very, very first time. Whether you're at, my first experience of qualitative research was a doctoral level, and it was a strange, strange world. And I thought I knew what it was, and I didn't. And it was a significant lesson. So regardless of whether you're doctoral, MBA, and I actually think this is fantastic for MBA students coming in, particularly kind of apprentice MBAs who've been out of education for some time, to come in and see this for what it is, without all of the extraneous elements that research can provide at that juncture, and see it for what it is. And we spend a lot of time creating lots and lots and lots of contemporary exercises to develop those key skills, to develop that schema, to develop the confidence, and ensure that a findings chapter ultimately does provide answers to the research question. And that's really the joy of this linear process. Without wishing to be too hyperbolic, I did ask one of my students to look at this for me and said, yeah, I can see the linear process. I really can see a linear process now of what to look for and how to maximize the time with my data. But I think one of the key things as well is we spend a huge amount of time getting transcriptions right in this. And I don't know whether you'd agree or disagree with me as colleagues within this environment. I'm unaware of anything that really addresses transcription in a truly meaningful way, in a way that is accessible, in a way that ensures students have something definitive to work with. And we do spend a lot of time on that over one or two modules, getting students to get that right with lots of tips, lots of insight, and lots of opportunities to experience transcribing. So I hope, does anybody have any questions about that at this juncture? No? Okay, great. So could I just, if I'll move on, if that's okay with everybody. So again, very much like the process with the literature review, we've got 6 modules, which I think is ample. Some of the modules are larger than others, naturally, because some of these topics take more time. But what we have done from the get-go is we've spent time understanding not what a theme is, but what a theme is in the context of what it needs to represent. I think students often think that themes are ethereal and you can make them up. but we spent a lot of time creating that the theme almost is reverse engineered back to the transcription and the quality of the transcription and the necessity of getting that right to ensure that themes become apparent. And we start to develop the students' confidence by talking about the relationship between codes, categories, and themes, but with a real exegesis and a real reduction of what they are in practical terms, also philosophical terms, but what the reader looks for and the marker looks for when they see a presented theme. So we deal with that anxiety up front. We acknowledge all of the issues around that. We provide definitive definitions of what they are, which will help recall. That can be used for citation purposes as well, can be used for methodological purposes to bring those elements in. And that's particularly important from my perspective, because I think students at any level, and I was speaking to MBA students last week about a thesis. I was marking it, clearly didn't understand where a code was. Clearly, was telling me what they knew, but I was getting no sense of what they were understanding. And what we're trying to do is develop understanding, and I think that's critical. So the other thing we do then is looking at how you elicit data from certain sort of qualitative frameworks, which sort of replicates a definitive need, because not all qualitative research is the same in terms of approach. We've talked about things like elite interviews, ethnographical elements, ethnography, and so on and so forth, and how to elicit data. I think elicit's the right word, but obtain data rather, and how to maximize those opportunities. So module 2 is about, we've got lots of top tips for recording your interviewees, focus groups, whatever it might be, and then how that translates to the start of the description process. Lots of ideas on how to create the perfect transcription, which has been integrated from years of teaching undergraduates and years of looking at postgraduate work, doctoral work, reviewing, and so on and so forth, where you can tell that transcriptions have not been addressed properly. And I think, frankly, going forward, dare I say it, I know there are 3 qualitative researchers on this call, which represents a substantive part of the world's population of qualitative researchers. We are moving towards more and more qualitative frameworks, particularly in my field, and that's particularly pleasing. So students need to understand how to get the most from this. So one thing I'm particularly proud of, we have a nice section on abstract thinking, which builds into that sort of metacognitive element we've talked about. Students don't understand that coding, whether it's inductive, deductive, still needs abstract thinking, particularly inductive. And we spend time with some exercises getting them to understand that and how they can utilize that to develop strong pre-codes to take them forward, predicated on what they've got. So we then have a look at what coding is. Obviously, we've made the initial connection in module 1. So students will be familiar with the language, they will have done exercises on it, there will be recall exercises and so on. So we get into actually what a code is, and there's a significant amount of time developing it and ensuring there are no gray areas about what it is and its fundamental purpose to the research process. And again, I would reiterate, that doesn't matter if you're an FE, HE, a doctoral student. From my own experiences, when you ask people what a code is, they don't know. And the truth is, I didn't know. I thought I did, I don't, and there's a lot I don't know. And as I say, I learn every day. So we then address some of the different ways to code. Many of you will be familiar with Sage's wonderful Salander book on coding. I've used it myself, I have read it, I recommend it regularly. But the fact is, it's a fairly hefty tome for coding. Sorry, Johnny, if you're listening. But we have tried to look at the more user-friendly elements within that and how students, looking at traditional kinds of students' thesis and research projects, recommend certain types of coding, 5, I believe, if my memory's right, and how they might be applied. And I think that's great by recommending those 5, looking at what they mean contextually, providing examples of how you might code with pre-created transcriptions. Students can build confidence about descriptive coding, emotional coding, and so on. And that's really important. And then hopefully they can progress to the Salander book, which is fab. So once we've done that, again, lots of exercises, we come to the dreaded categories. Again, lots of students don't understand what categories are. And again, nor did I. I just thought you asked somebody a question, they told you something, and then you presented it as an answer and moved on to the next phase of your life. So we spent a lot of time demonstrating how we find relationships between codes, how we use abstract thinking to find patterns and processes within those codes, and how they transform into broader categories. And we have lots of exercises of assembling codes from pre-coded documents. And there are a number of exercises with students to look for keywords, key themes, idiosyncratic elements, colloquialisms, whatever it might be, and bring those elements together, which will be a great exercise for developing confidence as they go along. So the last element then is turning your categories into themes. And of course, this is the essence of qualitative research. So again, we spend a lot of time, I have spent a lot of time on this particular module because it's the crux of the matter. And I'm, from my own experience of qualitative research, I thought I had themes. What I had was sentences from other people. And it came as a shock when my supervisor basically said, "What on earth are you doing? You're wasting your life." So it's so important to get this right. But what I have done, we don't stop there. This module then demonstrates clearly how to create themes, how to present the themes, how to support your themes, and how your themes then go forward into things like future research and so on and so forth. So again, very much like the other module, we've got a huge amount of detail, but it's sequential. It is fundamentally sequential. The students don't have any anxiety about jumping from A to Z, whatever it might be. It is digestible, it is small, and we spend time on the right things. We provide insight into some of the things like philosophy, which underpin this. The purpose of this module is not to teach philosophy. I'm sure if there are other maybe things pending, Megan will answer this, but if there might be something pending on philosophy, I don't know. I quite like philosophy for my sins. But so that's really what it is. So, ideally, they will be thinking about a data set. They may well have that data set. So we say, right, let's run with this. So I think that's really the essence of that. So I'm not sure how much time we've got left. It is
a few minutes, so you can.
I'm very sorry. I am Welsh and we are loquacious, so I apologise.
That's all right. Yeah, a couple minutes, and then I'll wrap up because we want to have a bit time of questions too.
Very much like the last element, but the key to take away from this is that it is sequential. It is not presented in a chapter. It is presented as distinct components which are synergistic, which are interconnected, and we build those synergies module by module by module by module. So hopefully you, indeed your students, we can enable a bit more confidence and an enjoyment. And one student actually said to me that trying to do things like this is like American football. Somebody gives you the ball and you just see obstacles in front of you and you just don't know what to do. So you run straight without any real strategy, and invariably you end up in a heap. From an American student, I should say. But yeah, so I will wrap it up there, guys. I would just like to say thank you so much for your attention. Again, happy to answer questions, but I hope there's something in there for you and your students and your institution, because I can assure you a huge amount of time has been spent on that. And without getting too emotional, there was a bit of a labour of love, actually. So yeah, I will be using it. I can assure you that for my students. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Rob. That was great. That was great in terms of an overview of everything. And as I think you know, and we've heard, there's so many people that have said, can we do something in literature review? Can we do something in qualitative data? Because there isn't as much out there on it. So I know it's something that a lot of people are really interested in. And that's a fantastic overview about how it's structured and been pulled together. So very briefly, I'm going to go quickly through how this actually works. But do remember, put any questions in. We will still have time for questions if you do want to ask anything to myself or Rob during this session or after. So how does Sage Campus work? It is available for institutional-wide subscription or purchase, and libraries, usually libraries subscribe or purchase. For that subscription, all faculty, students, and researchers at your institution will get unlimited access to the full suite of courses via the Sage Campus platform. So in this case, all 31, which from January, which amounts to just over around 265 hours of online learning. In terms of access and authentication, users need to authenticate. We support IP ranges, Easy Proxy, Shibboleth, Open Athens, and others in order to create an account. And once they have an account, they'll be able to enroll on courses and track their own learner progress. Faculty also get an extra set of permissions, as I alluded to, where they can assign courses to their students and track learner progress through those cohorts. Just lost my mouse for a sec. Very quickly, a couple user cases. I won't dwell too long on this, but you'll see on the screen some of the common use cases that we have seen with other courses on the platform. So assigning courses as prerequisite or preparatory material is definitely a popular one. It helps to improve student outcomes, so students can come into class on day one with the same level of knowledge and skills that they need to succeed. It allows the professor or the lecturer to really just know that everyone has a really similar level, and then they can kind of deep dive into their specific discipline or subject area. Supplementary teaching, we've all become very familiar in recent years on asynchronous teaching and flipped learning classrooms, so that's definitely been a use case. As well as seeing lots of faculty use it to upskill in their own skills in the latest research methods. And then finally, expanding face-to-face teaching that you might already be having in these subject areas at your institution, but to allow it to allow you to deliver it to more learners at your institution. I'm just going to quickly jump over the Q&A just because I'm going to say very quickly. So if you are interested in learning more, we do offer free trials for 30 days of the whole platform. If you want something a bit more lightweight that you'd like to look at now, we do have a demo hub where you can log in and see the full syllabus as well as the first module of all of the courses, including the 4 new ones that are coming in January. So you get to have a little taster sneak peek of those. We'll pop those in the chat and send those out after this webinar as well. And we will go to Q&A in a sec, but if you would like to find out more about all of this, please feel free to reach out to myself if you are in Europe, Africa, or the Middle East, or to my colleague Zara Hills if you are in North or South America, and to my colleagues in Asia Pacific. You'll see there's an email there where one of my colleagues in Asia Pacific will be able to pick up any queries. And with that, we have a few minutes for questions. So we'll turn to the questions box.
Hi, Megan.
Hi, Marcella.
So I have one question for you, and I have a couple for Robert that I can put them together.
Yep.
Sure.
Let me ask for you, Megan. Are there any plans for campus to be integrated with VLE?
Yes, that's a good question. So we do have plans to integrate campus with virtual learning environments and or learning management systems through LTI. That development work will be started in the first half of 2022, and we expect it to launch next year so that you'll be able to integrate the courses right within Canvas or Blackboard or Moodle and within your teaching.
Thank you. And Robert, I have a couple for you.
Sure.
Which courses should students take first? Is that a particular order? And are they suitable for students outside social sciences?
Yeah, so I think that's a superb question. So firstly, thank you for that. So I think, the way that the whole Sage campus has been designed is that it is linear and it's sequential and takes the student through that. But if you are having a student coming in at a point of entry, my recommendation is fundamentally to start with a literature review. It's the basis of every skill that they'll need going forward. It'll develop confidence, it'll immerse them in literature, it'll get them writing, and then they would go into that analytical process. Starting with analysis can be so off-putting. Developing those core skills through the literature review and the immersion in literature develops a lexicon. So that will be my advocacy in doing it as a linear process. And the second point, it has been designed for multidiscipline. There is, even though I'm a marketer, it has not been designed for marketing students. It has not been designed for business students. It has been designed for students out within social sciences, without social sciences, and with a view of the beginner at every solitary level of study. So I envisage this hopefully going to FE colleges at some juncture because they have to engage in research. It's certainly undergraduate centric. And from my own experiences of students, it's very much a need at doctoral level, particularly if there's a lack of experience or haven't gone through. And I think one thing that we're seeing more and more of are DBA students as well, who've got limited research experience in an academic sense. So that's critically important. So just to paraphrase, very much a linear approach, start with the basics. And I say with confidence that this is for everybody, not just business-centric students or social science students.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I think it kind of answers a bit of the other question that I had, if you had any advice or thoughts for those starting their academic life with no prior experience in research.
Yeah, I think this one, I'm a health profession educator. Look, I actually spend a huge amount of time with NHS students who've come onto my program for the MBA and so on and so forth. It is perfect because the dynamic, it doesn't matter where you're from, the process is the same. The only thing you'd have different is the context of the research. So for health professionals who want to get on, maybe doing a DBA, absolutely perfect. And in fact, I have one of my students works for BIBI, which is a recycling element, a global recycling proposition. He's used my little quick fix book to help him with that. But yes, it doesn't matter about profession, and it's not profession specific. It doesn't make any presumptions that you should be in a certain role to be able to utilize it. So please feel free to maybe get a trial and resolve that and see how you feel about it. But you'll see that it's inclusive. It's very much inclusive.
Thank you. It was very helpful. I don't see any other question.
No.
Anybody?
I was just going to say, when everyone leaves, again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining and for bearing with us with the technical difficulties of moving to Zoom. There is an exit survey when you leave that we'd appreciate it if you fill out and give any feedback or comments you have about the product, any questions you have, and of course about just generally the webinar in itself. So thank you everybody for your time. We will hang around for a few more minutes just in case anything does pop through, but we appreciate all of your time today and hope that you will reach out to us and are interested in Sage Campus for your institution.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.